In this video, Kevin O'Leary and Scott Jennings shut down a panel of liberals on CNN. Donald Trump calls Chuck Schumer a Palestinian. Marco Rubio shows exactly why he's a superstar for this administration. And Sebastian Gorka tells Jake Tapper that if you're gonna F around, you're gonna find out. Let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all's good wherever you are. The first clips we're gonna watch are of Kevin O'Leary in both clips and Scott Jennings in the first clip. The first clip we're going to watch is them talking about abolishing the Department of Education. And I think Kevin O'Leary brings up a great point here about the teachers union, which I'm going to get to after the clip. Let's get it.
A first step and a rude reality for thousands of Department of Education employees. Layoffs for the agency started tonight, and that's about half of the department's workforce is now gone. The secretary says that the rest of the workforce is likely to follow soon.
Is this the first step on the road to a total shutdown?
Yes, actually it is, because that was the president's mandate, this directive to me. What we did today was to take the first step of eliminating what I think is bureaucratic bloat. We wanted to make sure that we kept all of the right people and the good people to make sure that the outward-facing programs, the grants, the appropriations that come from Congress, all of that are being met, and none of that's going to fall through the cracks.
So Trump did, in fact, promise this, Bakari, and now he's following through. What do you think the impact is going to be?
I mean, I think that one of the things people fail to understand is actually how our public schools in this country are funded. People don't understand that we have a three-legged stool in the way that we fund our schools. You have your local tax dollars, your federal tax dollars, and your state tax dollars. And so when you make drastic cuts to the federal government, we're talking about your title programs, we're talking about your lunch programs, we're talking about the programs that affect your kids who have extraordinary or special needs. We're talking about all of those things that are going to be affected by draconian cuts such as this. If we want to go in and say that, look, and I think all of us could agree around the table that we're not preparing our kids for a 21st century global economy. If we wanted to start from that premise, and sorry to use, I'm not picking on you, but to use your words instead of whack, 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 whack. If we wanted to start from that premise and figure out how we can better educate our children, there are ways to do it other than draconian cuts. And I think in places like Mississippi, places like Arkansas, places like the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, South Carolina, and North Carolina, they're going to fill these cuts a lot more.
May I respond?
Please. I mean, it's an open show.
As an individual who worked in the education system for 14 years, there's 110,000 high schools in America. The majority of them are in New York, Florida, Texas, and California. Our reading and math scores are the worst in the G7 and the G20 in terms of how many dollars we spend to advance our children. Okay. Why? Unions. Unions that keep mediocre teachers in place in every high school in America when we should be firing them. You want to talk about whack as our theme tonight's show? I would like to fire teachers that don't... Wait. And I'd like to pay a lot more to the teachers that advance math and reading scores that push our system forward against every G7, G20 country. We have broken the system long ago through unions, and this is very unpopular.
But what are those cuts actually?
What it means is
the
lowest paid person in America that deserves a lot more money is a great teacher.
I agree, as a former teacher.
And we can't, in the system of unions in America, we keep mediocrity festering, destroying the education of children.
Let me just tell you how misguided your statement is.
Not at all.
But I mean, I'm just going to point out the fact that...
Thank goodness I'm here.
But you're wrong, and let me tell you why.
I'm 100% right.
No, I want to tell you why you're wrong. Because the bottom 10 states that are underperforming, those states that I'm talking about in the South, let's take South Carolina, for example, or Mississippi. You want to tell me one thing they don't have? One thing they don't have: strong teacher unions. So there is no direct correlation.
They have weak teacher unions?
Or barely any at all.
They have unions.
Yeah, but that's not the reason these places are failing.
So when
was the last time?
If you look at 10 teachers, 4 of them are great. I want to double their salaries.
That's no question. I agree with you.
So why don't you just get rid of unions?
Now what happens if you have a quarter of shame where kids go to school and their heating and air don't work, where their infrastructure is falling apart, where they have to drink unclean water, or they come to school hungry?
Send the money to the states. That's what Trump is doing.
How does that fix the problem I just laid out to you?
Well, you got to fix the unions first, because we both agree bad teachers destroy advancement of children.
So I just have a question. Are you saying that the cuts to the Department of Education that happens right now are going to impact the unions?
I would rather the dollars that are put into running.
I know, but you started talking about something else. But we're talking about the cuts to the Department of Education. I don't think those are directly.
No. You're cutting out the federal mandate and giving it to the state.
They're cutting the bureaucracy.
Yes.
I don't think they're cutting the money. They want to send the money directly to the states.
That's it.
Respectfully, if this bureaucracy that is in place now at the federal and state level, no matter what state you're talking about, we're doing such a bang-up job, we wouldn't have these terrible reading scores. We wouldn't have these terrible math and science scores. something is broken. And there's one more issue that no one's talking about, and that is the issue of truancy. We've got 30+% truancy rates in some places. Not only can these kids not read, we cannot even find them. The bureaucracy
I would not disagree. Exactly. I would not disagree with either of you all on the fact that we are not preparing our children well enough.
Would you want the state to control
But that's not.
this?
Absolutely not. And let me tell you why. I want there to be oversight. I don't necessarily want there to be a bloated bureaucracy, but what I do want is every child in this country to have an opportunity to succeed, regardless. And let me just tell you the biggest problem we have in this country, because you said unions. I will push back on you and say that the greatest problem we have is the fact that children are punished in this country because of the zip code that they're born into. And until you can find me some parity.
Different issue.
No, it's not.
Actually,
because
I mean,
the schools sit in those zip codes.
You can solve it with school choice.
Hang on a second, Kevin.
That's-
I mean,
the
I want
problem
you to
is that every
address
choice wouldn't be
what Bakari is saying. Okay, let's say that you get rid of the bureaucracy at the Department of Education. How do you ensure that kids are actually being educated and that they're not just being moved
Do you
out
think
of...
at the state level they hate children?
And that they're not just being...
You think at the federal level they hate kids?
That they're not just being moved out of the public school system because it's easier
Yeah.
to move them out than to educate them.
The one thing about education you can't deny is the reading and math scores. Unfortunately, that is the metric by which we test.
But do you understand my question?
No, I get it,
That
but
if
it's
you
not
take
dealing
the
with
lowest
the issue.
performing kids and you just take them out of the system, guess what those reading and math scores are going to do? They're going to go up. So how do you prevent schools
For them
from
to
doing
go
that?
up, you need great teachers.
Well, I think there's also a concept of teaching to the test, which actually doesn't create critical thinking skills to prepare people to go out and be thriving adults. You can actually have a student go through college or go through high school or go through grade school and let me finish. Thank you. And just be taught to the test. And so you literally. You know why? I know because I had an experience. I will never forget. Right? I was a teacher. I will never forget. We were going to take our regents, and we were really wanting to make sure our scores. So we were teaching to the test. The same night, I went home and watched the episode on The Wire, and they taught the exact same thing because they were teaching to the test. We were not preparing my students.
What percentage of your colleagues, when you were a teacher, sucked?
I think that I come from a family of educators. My grandmother was an educator. My aunt was a superintendent. My sister is a teacher. I think teaching is one of the hardest professions.
I agree.
And I think when you wake up every day and you say, I am going to take care of other people's children and try and advance them.
You're not answering my question.
I don't think every teacher, no, because I think that it is so easy.
Great.
I think it is so easy for people to be so disrespectful to teachers. It is a hard profession.
You're not answering the question.
In every single profession, there are people who are good and there are people who could be better.
Out of 10.
But the majority.
How many suck? How many out of 10?
All right, let me ask Van a question because let's say that everybody agrees we're not where we need to be as a country. What's wrong with trying to do something completely different? What's wrong with not just continuing what we've been doing that hasn't been working?
I mean, for me, I think there's more investment that's needed. I think we need to invest into early Head Start. Yeah. I think one of the hugest indicators on how a kid is going to perform in school later on in their scholastic career is how early they get what they need. So I think there needs to be more investment into early Head Start, more investment into other things that deal with some of the outside factors that keep kids from excelling in the classroom.
And the point that you brought up is really good because I want to, go ahead, Scott.
Well, just over the last 50 years in this country, the amount of money we spend on education has gone this way, but test scores have gone this way. It's not the money.
It's where
I agree with Kevin a little bit tonight because what we're talking about is one, because of the simple fact that he's talking about creating more teachers. And so Kevin's going out on this limb and saying that we need to make sure that we're investing in these HBCUs, in these community colleges, in these technical colleges, to make sure that we're putting and investing and making sure that people actually go to school to come out with these degrees to be teachers. And so I applaud you for that. I also think it's really easy for people to pile on teachers.
Yes.
Jobs that other people wouldn't take for $30,000 a year because teachers now have to not only go to work at your elementary school, but they work at Cracker Barrel too. Like they have
That's
other jobs.
horrible.
That's
It is horrible.
terrible.
They have roommates.
And they also need master's degrees.
Yes.
And advanced degrees. So these are not people just rolling
These
out
are
of high
underpaid
school.
people.
Does anyone believe in school
so-
choice at this table?
No.
I do. Why not?
The problem is that you have to make every school a good choice. And school choice works in metropolitan areas where you have things like transportation. But in the rural places, if you have 100 miles and you have 4 schools,
But we trap
are
a lot of urban kids in bad schools.
And the problem with that is that if you go to school choice, and I talk to Roland Martin and others about this all the time, you'll have something like white flight after Brown v. Board. But instead of white flight, you'll have the people who can't afford to leave that school will leave, and it will cause a drain at those schools.
I think we ought to give scholarships to the poorest kids to get them out of the worst schools as well.
Is it going to have transportation?
Or just fix the schools where they go.
But will it have transportation?
We can't litigate the whole school choice issue tonight on the show, but it's a good discussion for another time. Coming up next, a Justice Department official says she was fired because she refused to restore the gun rights of a MAGA fan.
Kevin O'Leary's spot on about the teachers' unions. These people are there for the teachers and not for the students. And this idea that you should have tenure or seniority just because you've been there the longest, or whether you're doing a good job or not, that you should just get paid more for seniority is BS. O'Leary mentioned better pay for better teachers. The better you are, the better your students are. We should have bonuses for these people. Teachers' unions are there to benefit teachers. What I mean by that is they are there to give teachers shorter hours, smaller classrooms, longer vacation times, more pay. They're not there for the students. And why is it that, say, for example, you're teaching in some fancy city in Connecticut, or let's use LA, you're teaching in Beverly Hills. Why should you get paid more to teach in Beverly Hills where it's easy, just a bunch of rich kids, versus somewhere like South or East LA? We should be rewarding teachers for teaching in communities that have a lower literacy rate, that are doing worse in math, because often the teachers that are there get paid less and don't want to be there because it's harder to teach in those inner city communities. There's often crimes, but if we reward people for doing that, you will end up with better teachers. O'Leary was spot on here. Let's get to the next clip.
It's creating this really deep sense of fear. And by the way, economic research shows that when that sense of fear sets in, it takes a long time to go away. It takes a year, 2 years, sometimes more.
Yeah, Kevin, I mean, you understand that. The markets are speaking with one voice. They are saying thumbs down, don't like it. And the CEOs are being pretty straightforward. Jamie Dimon, a month ago, he said, or a month and a half ago, he said, if tariffs are inflationary, but it's good for national security, so be it. Get over it. Today he's saying, I don't think the American worker goes to work in the morning, changes what they're going to do because they read about tariffs, but I do think companies might, and uncertainty is not a good thing.
Okay, let's separate the market from the policy. So stock market's correct about every 18 months as much as 10 to 20%. We're right in the middle of that right now. It's actually healthy. I mean, it feels terrible when it's occurring, but corrections have been part of the market for 150 years. So let's get over that. Let's talk about the policy of tariffs. Tariffs in this situation are not long-term yet. Even Ludnick today said he's having the Premier of Ontario tomorrow morning for discussions to bring down the heat on car and electricity issues. The challenge with Canada, which we just talked about, is they have no leader. Trudeau was kicked out on Sunday night at midnight. They're going to have a new leader in 90 days. Ludnick himself said this morning, let's wait till the new person who's going to be prime minister is in place and start a pan-Canadian negotiation. Now, tariffs themselves, nobody understands. If you ask the average person walking down the street, what's a tariff, they have no idea. What Trump is trying to do is to reset the tariff schedules that were set in place after the Second World War in every single country, not just Canada, not just Mexico, but Germany and England and France and Switzerland and India. So it's very simple. Let's say we make sugar, as we do, and India makes sugar. And they put 110% tariff on our sugar going to India. Why don't we just reciprocate? So what happens in a trade war where tariffs are escalated is when both sides say to each other...
But I do want to distinguish between what you're talking about, reciprocal tariffs, which he's promised
That's coming April 2nd.
Yeah, right. He's promised are coming. And what has actually been happening now, which is that Trump claims that they're going to be massive across-the-board tariffs on 2 countries that we have a trade agreement
I know
with.
You don't like Trump's style.
No.
You haven't liked it for 12 years.
I don't want people to be confused, is what I'm saying about what we're talking about here. What the markets are reacting to right now is Trump saying 25% on Mexico and Canada, and then the next day saying, "Oh, never mind, 50% on steel and aluminum," and then on the next, and then 6 hours later, "Oh, never mind."
You know,
But that's what they're reacting to.
Look, I don't think you can write off what is happening in the market right now as just a correction. One.
It is a correction.
2, Americans may or may not understand tariffs, but you know what they understand? They were promised that egg prices and other prices were going to go down. And what they're watching in the market, which seems to be a reaction to tariffs, is their retirement funds disappear. And they're making it very clear that they hold one person accountable in the poll numbers, Donald Trump. He won, and us Democrats lost because we didn't focus enough on the economy, and we didn't focus it in a way that was tangible and understandable to Americans.
Do you really think Americans are so dumb that they don't understand tariffs, that they don't understand that something's going to cost 25% more? Honestly, I think the person who doesn't understand tariffs is Donald Trump, who often says that it is the country that he's going to tariff that are going to pay those tariffs, when we all know it is us.
Like Mexico was going to build the wall.
Who's going to end up paying the tariffs.
Actually, people don't understand
So
tariffs.
in 1991, we had a $30 billion trade deficit. Fast forward to 2022, $950 billion. That's a 3,000+% increase. No one said anything about the price of goods going up, or at least acknowledged the price of goods, except for people on my side, going up over the past 4 years. And the point was made that it takes Americans about a year or 2 to get over the pain. Well, I guess it's going to take an additional 4 or 8 years for them to get over the previous 4 years. I think the president is right to attempt a reset as it pertains to our trade. I spent, an hour on my way up here looking at all these old articles coming out of liberal outlets over the past 10, 15, 20 years, talking about the disaster free trade has had on middle-class America, how it's destroyed manufacturing in this country, how once upon a time the Rust Belt was thriving, now it's in decay. You can't blame that on Donald Trump for wanting to focus and put a microscope and saying, wait a minute here, we have left a significant percent of our fellow Americans behind. Let's fix that.
I want to respond to this because, it's a little more nuanced. I've written some of those articles, and I've written 3 books, actually, about the problems with the neoliberal trading system. But there is a difference between doing what Trump 1 did, which is, raising the scrim on the global trading relationship, particularly between the U.S. and China, and saying, there's a problem, we have to rebalance. If you're going to do that, you need to have your allies with you. And that's what Biden did. He came in and said, we're going to keep some of those tariffs. Yes, he did. And I'll tell you, give me a minute.
Yeah,
I'll explain.
please.
He came in and he said, we're going to keep some of those tariffs in place, but we're also going to have an industrial strategy where we start working with allies to try and figure out how to rebuild, parts of the manufacturing industry. We're trying to retrain workers.
How effective was the strategy?
The chips industry, for starters, in 18 months.
Looking at the economy over 4 years, it was a disaster.
Let me just, please. In 18 months, the Biden administration brought back semiconductors, which hadn't been in this country in 50 years. That's no small thing. Back to what Trump's doing this time. I'm not against tariffs, but if you're going to rebuild industry, you need to work with allies. You need that shared demand. And right now, by trying to do it all at once, by trying to reset everything and all alone, I don't think you're going to be able to get to that end game of rebuilding industry. I really don't. You need Canada, for example.
You referenced the Chips and Science Act. A total waste of money. I, as a private investor, would never give Intel a dime. It's being sold for car parts right now. Crappy management. I was forced to pay as a taxpayer to a really crappy company.
Virtually anybody who is involved in
that's ludicrous.
Horrible bill. Horrible bill.
Nobody says that.
I'm saying it right now because it's a horrible bill, and I hope it gets shut down.
I'll let Rana respond to this because, look, I've talked to people who are in the defense industry, people who are in the technology industry. No one says that about Chips and Science.
I'm saying it right now.
Here's what they do say.
No one else says it.
Here's what they do say. They say it could have gone even further. That it's a
more money to Intel. Why the private sector won't invest in it?
But they say it could have gone even further.
Was it
Republicans, by the way, voted for it.
Was it a good idea for anybody, for the U.S., for China, for Europe, to have 92% of semiconductors made in Taiwan? No, it wasn't. The private industry was not bringing that back.
You can change the tax policy to get.
The government did that.
But Ron,
never pick companies.
I take that point. I actually don't disagree. You've even had companies as of this year saying that they're going to invest further in chip development within the
Indeed,
U.S.
it's a very
Correct.
good
So I
thing
don't
for this
disagree with
country.
that. Again, the premise of the argument that I'm making here, though, that's one particular sector. We're still behind significantly as it pertains to manufacturing writ large. And to put a spotlight and focus on that to at least return some of that back to the United
Well, I'll
States,
tell you what's
I don't
not
think it's
going to help
necessarily a bad thing.
manufacturing. If Canada starts making the factories in the upper
They
Midwest
rely more on
pay
us than
spot
we do on them.
prices for energy.
Canada relies
because
more on the
because
U.S.
Trump
than the
is
U.S.
not
relies on
working
Canada.
with allies that it's such low-hanging fruit. China's laughing all the way to the bank on this, by the way. They're just looking out.
Because last time I looked at their economic condition, it doesn't look very great. You should know that.
You know what they play? Oh, hello. They play the long game. It's not about the quarter. It's not about the company. It's about the state. And it's about building a pathway and sticking to it. We have to do that. And warring with adversaries and allies alike is not the way to do that.
Michael Singleton really positioning himself on this show, and I quite like him on here. I like when O'Leary is on there as well. Missed Scott Jennings in this clip, but nonetheless, we have to wait and see on the tariffs. And sometimes in life, you got to do stuff that is uncomfortable for the betterment of your people and your society in the future. Will stuff cost more initially? Who knows? Maybe your alcohol costs more. Maybe your French wine is going to cost you a little bit more. Buy American. And if you still want that wine, maybe it costs more. But in the long run, it benefits America. What I would like to see, and I know I mentioned it in the last video that I posted, is I would call centers to come back to America. Can we get call centers back? I'm tired of being routed to India or the Philippines or Mexico. No offense to those people, but I want to deal with Native American citizens. Now, let's get to the next clips where Trump shuts down a reporter for asking him the ludicrous question that is, what countries are going to be next on the travel ban? And he calls Schummer a Palestinian. This is hilarious. Let's go.
You might target in your next travel ban?
Say it.
Can you say which countries you might target in your next travel ban?
Wouldn't that be a stupid thing for me to say? I said, which countries am I going to target for the next travel ban? Can you believe somebody would ask that question?
As part of the
Well, we're going to talk. We're going to be talking really to the European Union. You know, I will tell you this one little, we'll end it with this. So I have a property, a big property in Ireland that you know well. It's one of the most highly rated hotels in all of Europe. It's beautiful. Doonbeg. It's a beautiful 600 acres on the ocean, and everybody knows it. And we have a beautiful hotel. And I was going to do a project there, a big expansion of the place. This was when I was a civilian, before the presidency, before I even thought about the presidency. But I was going to do a really beautiful expansion of because it does very well. And I got the approvals from Ireland so quickly. They were so professional. They wanted it. You know, it's economic development, it's jobs, it's construction jobs, a big expansion, beautiful expansion. But I was told something that bothered me. They said, sir, you also have to get approved by the European Union. I said, why do I have to go to the European Union to expand a hotel that's in Ireland? They said, well, that's the way it is. I say, well, shouldn't that go fast? They said, no, it'll take at least 7 years. You gave me the approval in about 4 weeks. It was a beautiful, professional. If you took 4 years, you wouldn't have done a better job. You know, everything was done environmentally, everything. There's no reason to take very long. I had everything from Ireland in 4 weeks. And then I hired somebody. He said the process will be from 5 to 7 years. And I said, oh, really? And then I found out that they weren't playing games. Now think about how bad that is for your country. So that was my first experience with the European Union. And I dropped the project. I just said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go 7 years to expand something. But I have to, I'll hand it to Ireland. You were so professional, so good. But I don't know why. European Union had to approve it. And with them, it was dealing. And that's the European Union. So it was a very bad experience I had.
Just say, President, you have the distinction of being.
Well, we are planning to lower taxes, yeah, if the Democrats behave. But the Democrats have no clue. You saw that the other night during the speech. 2 young women were slaughtered by illegal aliens. 1 young man has very serious cancer and many other problems. We look at the people up there. They all had difficulty, very serious difficulty. But when we're talking about two young girls, beautiful young girls, Lake and Riley, you know the whole story. That evening was a disaster for the Democrats, in my opinion. And I would mention, and I'd see two mothers that were inconsolable as they stood, crying. Their daughters have been absolutely just destroyed, killed, viciously killed. And the young man who loves the police departments, he had cancer and has cancer, very bad cancer. There wasn't from people sitting there, Democrats, there wasn't a hand clap. Nobody stood. They were just stone-faced. These people are sick. There's something wrong with them. There was no standing for anybody. The only thing they liked is when they heard about the death taking place with Ukraine. They were happy about that. They were happy about that. Pocahontas was very happy. She's the one that was slapped. That's why I looked at her. I said, oh, it's Pocahontas. These people are sick. They don't know what's happening in the real world. The Democrats have to get their act together. And if they don't vote, then what you're going to do is you're going to have taxes that are going to go through the roof. You're going to have a very bad time. You're going to have some very bad things happen. And people are going to blame the Democrats. And Schummer is a Palestinian, as far as I'm concerned. He's become a Palestinian. He used to be Jewish. He's not Jewish anymore. He's a Palestinian.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to end it here with two small clips. One of Sebastian Gorka telling Jake Tapper that, hey, if you mess around with America or our allies, you're going to find out. And the second clip, which is a great clip of Marco Rubio talking about speech and talking about, look, listen, if you're here on a student visa and you're not a natural American citizen, you don't get the rights that American citizens have. We can deport your ass. So thank you for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. Subscribe, leave a thumbs up. I'll catch you in the next one. Let's get to the clips.
Well, with the concurrence of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, that has gone down to the combatant commanders. So this sheer insanity of the Biden administration, Jake Tapper. During Vietnam, we had the 6,000-mile screwdriver, and now we have the 10,000-mile joystick for the last 4 years, where every HVT high-value target had to go up to the White House, to the National Security Council, or even to the Commander-in-Chief. That is over. As the president posted in his viral social media post, if you threaten Americans or our partners and allies, we will find you and we will kill you. And that's exactly what we've done with more than 20 jihadis in just the last 53 days across the globe.
President Trump appealed to a lot of Americans during his campaign on free speech arguments and not suppressing speech, especially from the government. But your revocation of the green card, to many, is seen as one of the most anti-speech actions a secretary can take with his powers. How do you respond?
Yeah, when you enter this is an important point, and I'm glad you asked this question. When you come to the United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country, as on a visitor's visa, okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities, I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card as a result of that visa while you're here in those activities, we're going to kick you out. It's as simple as that. This is not about free speech. This is about people that don't have a right to be in the United States to begin with. No one has a right to a student visa. No one has a right to a green card, by the way. So when you apply for a student visa, or any visa to enter the United States, we have a right to deny you for virtually any reason. But I think being a supporter of Hamas and coming into our universities and turning them upside down and being complicit in what are clearly crimes of vandalization, complicit in shutting down learning institutions. There are kids at these schools that can't go to class. You pay all this money to these high-priced schools that are supposed to be of great esteem, and you can't even go to class. You're afraid to go to class because these lunatics are running around with covers on their face, screaming terrifying things. If you told us that's what you intended to do when you came to America, we would have never let you in. And if you do it once you get in, we're going to revoke it and kick you out.